They chose men with living sons on purpose. That way, if the father died, the bloodline did not. 300 Spartan men march north in the summer of 480 BCE, and every single one of them has already been marked for death, not by the enemy, but by their own king, before they ever leave the city. This is not the story you think it is. It is not 300 heroes standing alone against impossible odds for glory. It is a political execution, dressed up as a legend, and the empire on the other side of that mountain pass brought more soldiers than most ancient cities had citizens. By the end of this video, you will know why Leonidas picked those specific 300 men, and why the story the Greeks told afterward buried the men who were actually left to die beside them. Greece, 480 BCE, not a nation. A patchwork of rival city-states that hate each other almost as much as they hate the empire now crossing the Hellespont. That empire belongs to Xerxes I, king of Persia, ruler of the largest empire the world has yet seen. His army has been marching for months. Ancient sources describe supply lines stretching for miles, rivers reportedly drunk dry by the sheer number of men and animals passing through. Sparta is different from every other Greek city. Boys are taken from their mothers at 7 years old and raised by the state in a brutal training system called the agoge. They are beaten on purpose, underfed on purpose, and taught that returning from battle without your shield is worse than dying in it. But Sparta's real secret is not its warriors. It is who those warriors are trained to control. Sparta is outnumbered before Persia even arrives by its own population. For every Spartan citizen, there are several helots, enslaved Greeks, conquered generations earlier, forced to farm Spartan land. Historians estimate the ratio at somewhere between 5 and 10 helots for every Spartan. Sparta does not fear Persia the way it fears its own slaves. This is why Sparta invents the krypteia, a secret institution described by the ancient writer Plutarch, in which young Spartan men are sent out at night with a knife and no other equipment, permitted to kill any helot they find, with no legal consequence. Sparta formally declares war on its own slave population every single year, so that killing a helot is never technically murder. It is policy. When King Leonidas selects his 300 to march to Thermopylae, Herodotus records the criteria directly. He chooses only men who already have living sons, not the strongest, not the youngest, men whose family lines would survive them. Leonidas does not expect to come home. He is building a controlled loss, not planning a victory. But 300 is not the number of men who actually die at Thermopylae. That number is missing hundreds of people the ancient sources barely name at all. And once you know who they were, the whole legend changes shape. Herodotus records that each Spartan brings helot attendants with him to the pass, likely close to 1,000 additional men in total, unarmed or lightly armed, doing the labor the warriors would not do themselves. When the final stand happens on the third day, ancient accounts suggest these helots fight and die alongside their masters. Almost none of them are named. Not one statue was built for them. Not one epitaph. The most quoted line from Thermopylae is the epitaph credited to the poet Simonides, inscribed at the site, a message to travelers, telling them that here, obedient to Spartan law, the dead men lie. It sounds noble in translation. In context, it is a recruitment slogan. It is a state teaching every future Spartan child exactly what their life is worth to the system that raised them. Here is the part the movies never show you. Thermopylae was not a desperate defense that failed nobly. Modern historians studying Herodotus' own account point out something colder. Sparta sent a deliberately small force, knowing it would die, to buy time, while the rest of the Spartan army stayed home. Why? Because Sparta was still afraid of its own helots revolting the moment its warriors marched too far from home. The 300 were not all Sparta had to send. They were what Sparta was willing to spend. Every one of those men, and the helots who died with them, unnamed, was a calculated loss in a war that was never really about the 300 at all. It was about what Sparta could afford to lose, and who counted as a loss worth recording. That is the machinery underneath the legend. A city so afraid of the people it enslaved that it treated its own famous warriors as an acceptable price, and treated the men serving beside them as if they had never existed. Every empire tells you it was built on courage. Look closely enough, and you will usually find it was built on who the empire decided did not need to be remembered. Thermopylae is still taught as a story about 300 men who chose to die free. Somewhere in that pass, buried under the same soil, are hundreds more who were never given the choice at all. If you want more history they buried, subscribe. New video every day.